Hey, mountain gardeners. As we start to gear up towards spring, I want to talk to you guys this week about one of the most important parts of our gardens, and that is soil. So, today we're going to talk about what is soil, how is it different from dirt, and why is it so important to our raised beds. We talk about the 103 blend, and that is a third topsoil, a third sand, coarse sand, and a third compost with an extra little 3% of worm castings, which are personally my absolute favorite garden fertilizer around. The sand and the topsoil are going to be our minerals. They are, in general terms, sand, silt, and clay. Our basis for soil is that we want to have about 20% clay and then about 40% silt and 40% sand. And so when we do this 103 blend, we're getting about that ratio. We do then want to also have organic matter, and that is going to be our compost. And that will be what feeds our soil and our plants over time. All of the nutrients that are found within organic matter that's taken up into the plants and helps them grow. That extra 3% is the worm castings. And there's a couple of different ways that you can put worm castings in your soil. One, you can mix it in, you can buy them bagged, and you can mix them in right when you are building your new bed, topping off your beds in the spring or the fall. Or you can take a handful and place it in the bottom of your planting holes as you're transplanting your crops. I do that because it really gives that nutrient right at the base of the roots and tells those roots to grow down to where the worm castings are and really helps to create a healthy and thriving plant. So if you're having problems in the middle of this season, the best thing that you can do is a soil test. Most of our extension offices in the United States have an option for you to send in a soil sample, but there are also some really great options that you can purchase online. I like this rapid soil test kit. It has different compartments for each of our main nutrients that we have in our soil. So when you're looking at fertilizers, we have that NPK test. So this one tests for nitrogen, or the N. This one tests for phosphorus, or the P. This one tests for potash, or the K. And then it does have one more that will test for pH. So if you are having some issues with your soil or with your crops, the number one thing you should do is a soil test. And that can help you determine, are you lacking any nutrients in your soil? Now, there are a lot of other micronutrients, and you could be lacking some of those as well. And that's where your extension office or a professional soil test would benefit you. If you run this NPK test and everything comes back fine, you might want to look into doing a proper mail-in soil test. So one of the other things that we can do for our soil when things aren't going right is test our pH. Most of our plants like a very neutral pH, so somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5. But we do have some crops that are very acid loving. Blueberries is a major kitchen garden crop. And so I'm going to use my same little controller that I used for temperature. It does have a pH setting. And then do the same thing. I'm actually going to go a little bit deeper for the pH so that I can really test where that root zone is. There we go. And I'm going to let it sit there for a couple moments so that it can read it. So this is reading 6.5. And that's really great for my general crops. Now, I do have blueberries over here in these pots. And as I said, those really acidic soil. So with my blueberries, I do want to put my pH meter in there. And I want that pH to be closer to 4.5 to 5.5. So we are reading 5.7. So I might want to put in an acid fertilizer or some peat moss to bring that down slightly. But I think I'm actually okay with it being 5.7. So I have lots of blueberries pots. We can't plant blueberries in the soil in Colorado because our soil is incredibly alkaline. So I do have a couple of pots of blueberries. That one over there was measuring 5.7. I'm totally fine with that number. This one over here is 6.5. And that's a little bit high for me for blueberries. So once this soil is not frozen, because it is right now, I will amend this soil to make it a little bit more acidic. So that's going to be adding peat moss, and then special balanced acid fertilizers or acid-loving plants. So our next soil topic for this week is going to be soil temperature and why it is important. So when you get a seed packet, you'll notice that it has an ideal germination temperature. Some seeds can germinate as low as 35 degrees. Radishes is basically it. although they do soil temperature to be slightly higher than that. And so it's important if we're going to be planting in early spring to measure our soil temperature so that we're not stressing about our seeds not germinating. The way that we do that is we get a soil thermometer, and you're going to come out not in the middle of the day, I am right now, but as early in the morning, 5 days in a row, and you are going to measure the temperature of the soil. That is going to give you your average soil temperature. And if it's warm enough for those plants that you want to direct sow, then you can go ahead and plant them. If it's still too cold, then you'll want to wait off a few weeks or a couple days and continue testing that soil temperature to make sure that it is an appropriate temperature for your seeds to germinate. If you're outside, all you're going to do is take your soil thermometer, you're going to place it barely into the soil and then let it settle on the temperature, and it'll let you know what your temperature is. So let me know if you guys have any questions. So anytime that I add soil into the garden, compost, soil, whatever, I am going to turn it a little bit. And so the reason I do that is I don't want there to be a barrier between the soil that was already there and the soil that I added. And so all I'm going to do is turn the soil and mix up that compost that I added. And that makes sure we don't have this thing called a texture interface, which basically tells the water, hey, this is different soil. You don't want to go there. And then the soil doesn't ever penetrate. So that's why we mix whenever we add amendments into our soil. There you go. Anytime that I am adding compost into a bed to top dress it, I'm going to turn it into the soil. I'm not going to set it on top. So I'm going to flip the camera around and show you guys how I do that. Hi. So last year, I walked you guys through the process of rebuilding my garden beds. And so far, I absolutely love them because they are so tall and it's phenomenal. So when we were done building the beds, we put all of the original soil from old beds into the new beds. And then we topped off my garden beds with about another 3.5 yards of soil, almost to the very top of the beds. And already over a month and a half, 2 months, I haven't planted anything in here yet. The soil has already dropped. So you can see over here, especially where the snow takes a little bit longer to melt, that's where it is dropping even further. And so there's a couple of reasons why this happens. Before you start planting, the soil is going to drop because the pore space, or the space between all of the stuff that's actually in there, is mostly taken up by air. And air is lighter than anything else. But as time goes on and that pore space gets filled up with water, the soil compacts and drops down a little bit. Even more over time, as you're planting in your garden, the soil is going to compact more and more. One of the reasons why we love raised beds is because then you're not stepping in your planting area, compacting that soil even more than it needs to be. Over the growing season, when you are planting, the nutrients are also being taken up by the plants. And so at the end of the growing season or the beginning of the growing season, we always recommend topping off with 2 to 4 inches of compost. I mix it into the top 2 inches of my bed and then top it off with another 2 inches of compost if I have space. And what that does is it brings that soil level back up to the top and also replenishes any nutrients that were lost during the growing season. So sometimes when you get soil from a soil yard, it has been sitting in the sun for quite some time and can be pretty dry. And dry soil is what we typically call hydrophobic. It does not to take in water. If you're at home and you forget to water your plant, the best way to combat that, your indoor plant, is that you bottom water it. You stick it in some water, you let it soak up all the water from the bottom. Eventually, all the soil becomes wet. In a raised bed, we can't really do that because there's no bottom. When we have hydrophobic soil, I added in this soil right here. You can see it's really dry. It's powdery versus the soil here that was sitting in the snow over this past week. The way that we can fix the hydrophobic soil is doing a very light and slow water. And also, as we water it, mix it up a little bit. After I fill up my bed, I'm actually going to turn in my hydrophobic soil. And then after I'm done filling up all of my beds, I will give everything a really good water to make sure that everything is going to be nice and moist for when I'm ready to plant my seeds. If I started off with dry soil, then my seeds aren't going to germinate nearly as quickly. So I do want it to be nice and moist when I do start my seeds in the soil.